Well, the leaders of France and Germany have proposed a new COVID-19 recovery plan worth 500 billion euros. The fund, announced by Chancellor Angela Merkel and President Emmanuel Macron, calls for $500 billion in spending for EU economies hardest hit by the pandemic. Those countries will not be required to pay back the aid money, as the plan will be tied to the next EU budget. This money would be in addition to the 500 billion euros in spending already agreed to by the Eurozone finance ministers last month. Well, speaking earlier, Macron and Merkel called for increased European unity in the fight against the virus.
It is our common desire to provide Europe with very concrete means to deal with health matters and to work together with common stocks of masks or tests, coordinated purchasing for treatments and vaccines, shared epidemic prevention plans, and common methods for recording and identifying cases. This European health initiative has never existed. It must become our priority.
Europe must show solidarity. That is why rapid economic recovery is needed, and that is why we want to set up a temporary fund of 500 billion euros. The EU should provide budgetary spending, not loans, but budgetary spending for the sectors and regions most affected by the pandemic.
Well, let's go to Jack Parrock, who's in Brussels, for more on this. Well, good evening to you, Jack. So, if this is, to all intents and purposes, a proposal to mutualise debt in the EU, that would beg the question, how likely is this to be passed?
Good evening, Isabel. Well, that's exactly it. I mean, most of the EU countries have had the understanding that mutualising debt will be something that's necessary for the COVID-19 recovery. But it's about how you do that. And really what Merkel and Macron have done is laid their cards on the table. This is what they suggest. Now, for an analogy, we could say you and I, Isabel, want to borrow some money, and whether we should do it together and put our credit ratings together, or whether we should do it on my credit rating or your credit rating, or whether we can ask our parents to put it on theirs. And that's essentially what's happening. They're saying that the European Commission, which has a top credit rating on capital markets, should take on some debt from the markets to the tune of 500 billion euros and then loan it out to the EU countries that are most affected and into the sectors where they need it most, without the need for those countries to be expected to pay it back as they're working on their recovery. Now, countries like the Netherlands, Sweden, that aren't so keen on joining their debt up with highly indebted countries like Italy, like Spain in the south, still might not like this. But those countries in the south that wanted a much bigger fund, potentially 1.5 trillion they were talking about initially, they'll be pleased in some sense with this Franco-German suggestion, because what it will mean is that they get the money without the sort of loan repayment demands on top of them. Merkel and Macron are basically trying to find the middle ground here between all of those countries.
And it's interesting, Jack, isn't it? Because as those two made this announcement, they did it without the European Commission. So how does this fit into other recovery plans proposed by the EU?
Yeah, they're pushing it down forward before the European Commission, and the President von der Leyen has outlined her fresh proposal. We've been expecting it, and it's been delayed quite a few times. We do expect it probably this week. She was going to put forward a proposal for this EU budget with this fund sat inside of it. And really they're pushing, Macron and Merkel are pushing the agenda here as she and her officers continue to scribe this proposal. As I said, that they were expecting it to be a little bit higher, perhaps. Perhaps the Commission will propose something slightly different to what the French and German leaders are putting forward. And it's also really important to note that the European Parliament, which will eventually have to vote this through, last week demanded that a fund to the tune of 2 trillion euros was going to be put into the next 7-year budget that will start at the beginning of 2021. So the leaders won't only have to appease the other leaders in the EU, but will also have to get the European Parliament on side, Isabel.
OK, so the Franco-German motor trying to push the EU agenda there. Thanks so much, Jack Parrock, for us there in Brussels.